My name's Greg. This is the Gourmet Woodsman. Today I'm going to show you some of the tools and supplies I use to make sausage and charcuterie at home. This video was requested in the comments a while ago, and I apologize. I said I'd make it sooner than I am. Better late than never. If you're going to make your own sausage or salami, you're going to need a meat grinder. This particular one is a pretty big boy. I killed the one I bought because I wasn't honest with myself about how much meat I was going to grind, and I just wore that thing out. Lucky I got a neighbor who was lending me this. I'm not endorsing any brands on this. I'm not paid by anyone. This particular grinder is a Weston. I'd say probably more important than your brand is get a size appropriate for what you're going to do. It has that piece. I'm not really sure what you'd call that. We're all going to have an auger, I don't know. It's going to have a cutter, which you're going to want to keep sharp. And it's going to come with some cutting blades. This particular one I'm borrowing, it only comes with 2. And I'm hesitant to buy any because it's not my grinder. It's got a 7mm and a 4.5. Most of them come with like 4 of these, down to even a 3mm for a real fine. You're going to want to keep your cutter sharp and your plate sharp. And then it's going to come with a hopper. Going to fit on top like that. You're going to cinch this down. And they're also going to come with a plunger. Now, you don't ever want to push your meat through. You want to just let the grinder do the work. Sometimes you need to use that to just get it down into place. Sometimes if you're grinding twice, you do need to give it a little assistance. But get a grinder. You want to grind your own meat because the grocery store, the butcher, they're not going to be making sure your meat is 32 degrees or cooler. You're going to have more fat smear. Seems pretty obvious, but you're going to need some bowls big enough to grind whatever size recipes you're making. You're going to want some nice big bowls. Hotel pans are great if you can get your hand on a couple of hotel pans. They're not cheap, but they're really awesome to have around. So you need containers big enough to mix and measure and whatever you got to do. You're going to want to have a couple of scales. Again, I'm not doing a product review or endorsing any of the brands I use. No one pays me, so I'm not endorsing anything. But find yourself a good, accurate scale. I've got one that's big enough to weigh many pounds. I believe this goes up to 40 pounds, far more than I'll do. Then I also have a gram scale. You want to have one that at least goes to the tenths of a gram. This goes to the hundredths of a gram. And I always do all recipes by percentage. Reason why I always do percentages is because spices, herbs, salt, it's not all equal. Here's a very popular brand, Diamond Crystal. I use this for all my cooking. Not necessarily all my sausage making, but when I'm adding salt to a meal, I just like it's a bigger grain. But let me show you. 1 tablespoon of Diamond Crystal salt. This says 1077. Here's another very popular brand of salt, Morton Kosher salt. They both have one ingredient, salt. But look what 1 tablespoon of this does. The last one was 1077, 1078. So a tablespoon of this, almost 20 grams. That's why I do all my recipes by percentage. Any recipe that says use a teaspoon or a tablespoon of salt, be highly suspect. Sausages, 1.5, 1.7% is about good for most sausages. Salamis, it's going to be more like 2.5, maybe 2.25, somewhere in that range. Okay, so there's our scales. Speaking of salt, I use Instacure number 1, and I use Instacure number 2. Instacure number 1 is 6.25% sodium nitrite, and the rest is table salt. Instacure number 2 is 6.25% sodium nitrite and 1% sodium nitrate, and the rest is table salt. Instacure number 1 is for cooked sausages or very narrow diameter salamis that are going to cure in less than a month. Instacure number 2 is for longer projects, fatter salamis, salumis, things that are going to take more than a month. It's the nitrites that really do the magic, but for a long cure you need the nitrates to convert into nitrites. You want more information on that? Shoot me a comment. I could do a video about that. Alright, once I have my meat cut up, ground up, I got my salt and my herbs and spices all mixed up, now I gotta mix everything. Sometimes if I have a small batch, I'll use this stand mixer with the paddle attachment. It works quite well, but I'll be honest, I don't really like washing extra dishes. I usually just mix it up in a bowl, and I always use gloves because I don't like getting stuff up in my fingernails, and I don't want to share what's in my fingernails with whoever's eating my sausage. But I also wear cotton liners before mixing. Put these on underneath these. Not only does it keep my hands from freezing, but I don't want to warm up the meat. Very important to keep everything cold when making sausage. If you were doing really big batches, you might want to get a meat mixer that attaches to your meat grinder. Like if you got a whole deer and wanted to make 25 pounds of sausage, yeah, it might be nice to have a mixer. I don't have one because 5 pounds-ish is usually my batch size, which is a little too big for this. These next items really apply just to salamis, but you're going to want a starter culture, a bacterial starter culture. Got a couple of TSPX, got a Flavor of Italy. They're going to contain different bacteria that's going to lower the pH below 5.2, which is the safety zone. Now this one is not entirely necessary. If you don't use it, you quite likely will get some naturally occurring white molds to help protect your salami. But to ensure you have white molds protecting your salami, you can grow them yourself. This is mold 600, otherwise called Penicillium nalgiavensis. If you get a nice coating of white mold, it's going to protect it from the greens, the blacks, the yellows, reds, things you don't want. Now these are all living things, so they have a shelf life. Like yeast, they're going to become less active over time. I store mine in the freezer, keep them in one of these bags, top seals. I push as much air out of it as I can. My food sealer has an attachment for that, so it just sucks the air out. If you're making salami, I highly recommend having a pH pen. The pH paper is not accurate enough in my opinion. So again, I'm not doing any brand endorsements. No one pays me. Mine is an Apera. There's plenty of decent pH meters. Just make sure it has a probe that you can use in meat. Some pH meters only like to be in liquid. Got to calibrate these periodically. You want to make sure that your salamis are getting below 5.2. That is the magic number. And there's a big difference from 5.0 to 4.8 as far as how tangy it'll be, which is why I feel like the paper is not accurate enough. So a good pH pen, highly recommended if you're going to get into making salamis. I highly recommend for sausage or salami, a dedicated sausage stuffer. So they're going to come with a container. This here is a 5-pound stuffer, supposed to fit 5 pounds of meat. Comes with several different size horns. There's your Big Daddy for salamis. Use that one for kielbasas. That's good for your sandwich size, your bun stuffing sausage. That's good for your breakfast sausage. And the reason I suggest a dedicated stuffer, this has a piston. You're gonna stuff your meat in here, push all your air out, and this piston is gonna force the meat out. If you use a KitchenAid attachment, or some meat grinders have a stuffing attachment, it works by pushing the meat forward through that auger. Auger, tomato, I don't know. You know what I'm saying. When it forces it out with the auger, that creates friction. Friction is heat. Heat's gonna smear your fat. Highly recommend a dedicated sausage stuffer. Here's a set of completely unnecessary tools, but they are handy and helpful. When you're finished, when you've stuffed all the meat that'll come out, there's always some left in your horn. So these handy little tools are meant to fit those horns, push it out. You can use the back of a spoon, works pretty well. Another thing that works pretty well, say you're stuffing this and it's full, take the next size down, cover it with plastic, and you can just use that to push so it's out. So you don't really need those tools, they're just handy. And it also comes with different size brushes, which when it comes to cleaning the horns, these are extremely handy. Again, probably not necessary, but super handy to have. So can't really talk about sausages without talking about casing. Now, for breakfast sausages, I like to use sheep casings. I like the 22-24. These are hard enough to work with. Much smaller than that, it's just really hard to get on the horn. Much bigger than that, I just assume get a hog casing. But that's just me. These I got from the sausage maker. These are hog casings. These are 42-44. I like these for like a kielbasa size thing. You know, something you're going to make slices of, not something you're going to stuff into a bun. These also came from the sausage maker. And then I got these ones. These ones here are from the butcher's pantry. And these are 30-32 hog casings. Casings come in a unit described as a hank. That's mostly what I use for sausage. Some narrow diameter salamis. I like to get my casings soaking the night before I'm going to use them. You know, at least 4 hours is good, but I like to go the night before and just leave them soaking in my fridge. I feel like they get softer, and I feel like it gives them a better snap when it's all said and done. What I do is I like to find the end or beginning, whatever you want to call it, and open it up. See that? and I get the water going and just run water through it. And let's see if I can't lift this up so you can see. See, it gets pretty full. This helps stretch out the inside and just flushes them out. You don't have to fill it all the way. You just push the rest of the water through them, and it will just flush out the whole casing. And that way you flush the salt out of the inside as well as the outside. And then back into the soaking water until I'm ready to use them. So you don't use your whole casing. Here's what I do about that. Take the unused part, take a strainer, rinse off anything that it might have picked up on the horn, and then I just set it here, let that dry for about 10-15 minutes. So after I've let this drip dry a little bit, I'm just gonna add some salt. So just regular old Morton's kosher salt. No need to use the expensive stuff for this. Starts to shrink up almost immediately. I'm gonna leave that to sit for another 10 or 15 minutes. After about 15 minutes, I don't know if you can see, there's a tiny bit of water in there. I just save these, put them in a container. Those are good to go. Those are back in storage. There are narrow collagen casings you can use for snack sticks and whatnot, although I prefer to use a sheep casing for that. And then I use collagen casings usually for salamis. This is a big one. These are 3.5 inches, 90 millimeter. That's what I use for like a big daddy. If you saw my summer sausage video, I use this size. And again, they call it a collagen middle. Then I like the 61 millimeters for salamis in general. Unless I'm making a narrow diameter, like a chorizo or whatnot, in which case I use the 42-44 for that. But I like these for salamis. I usually get them pre-tied. I forgot to get them pre-tied this time. That's what I used if you saw my finocchiona or my Thai salami. I use this size. And then when I'm making salumi, which is dry cured mussels, I like to use these collagen sheets. And these also came from Butcher's Pantry. Again, I don't really want to endorse anyone. I'll say they have pretty good casings, and the collagen sheets is a good deal. They have a better deal on the collagen sheets. I've stuffed things in beef bung, and honestly, I found that it didn't slow down the drying as much. I was happier with the way it came out with these collagen sheets. You can see in my bresaola video, I've got a guanciale video coming up. Pancetta I did with this, pork loin, capicola, all of it. I like wrapping in this. So when it comes to wrapping things, it's good to have netting. You don't want netting. Mostly use the big size because that's most of the mussels I'm putting are pretty large, and use the big size netting. But some salamis, like there's some softer salamis that are almost like a pate, tomato, I don't know. So yeah, some narrower ones, but honestly, those last me a lot longer because I just don't use them as often. And seems simple and obvious. You're gonna want some butcher's twine for all this. Some sausages get tied off. Your whole mussels are gonna want to be tied off. Good to have some butcher's twine. Now, if you do get into salumi, I highly recommend getting yourself a meat slicer. You're not gonna be able to get paper thin slices with a knife. I mean, maybe you can. It's going to be hard to do it consistently. Can't really beat a meat slicer. I have this Vivor slicer. I'm not going to necessarily endorse it or not, but I will say for the money, I've been pretty happy with it. It was a lot cheaper than a commercial slicer, and it's worked pretty well for me. I've had it for a couple of years now. Hasn't really let me down. Another handy tool to have, seal-a-meal, food saver. You really can't equalize or mature your salumi projects without being able to vacuum seal your project. So highly recommend it if you're going to be into curing your meats. And even if you're just making sausage, you know, it's such a project to make sausage. It's nice to be able to just seal some up, put them in the freezer. They last a really long time if you have a vacuum sealer. So from here, I think we got to go to my drying chamber. So for my salamis and salumis, I've converted this refrigerator. First I converted this one. Just cut out the bottom. You can see my check out my charcuterie video. Kind of show you both. But I put a little computer fan in there. I don't know if you can see, but just a little computer fan. And this one, my computer fan's up here. Come over here real quick. The lighting's not great. But over here, got a controller for my fan. Keep it not quite all the way up. Most of the way up because it's a pretty big refrigerator. And then to control the temperature, I have an Inkbird. Again, I'm not advertising for anyone. There's lots of other companies. You can build these yourself. These are like plug and play. They're pretty easy to do, so I like them. But I have it set for 55 degrees Fahrenheit. I have it set for 80% humidity. And then plugged into the other side of this, I have a humidifier and a dehumidifier. I have my humidity hooked up to a dehumidifier, and I use the 2200 size, but I found the 1500. I went through 2 of them. They just didn't last. And the other side is hooked up to a humidifier. I want to show you something real quick. You gotta have one that has a positive on-off. It's off, it's on. Some digital ones, they won't work with your controller. It'll shut off and it won't go back on automatic. So just something to keep in mind. And that's kind of it. You know, they've got these, there's the temperature controller probe, there's the humidity controller probe. Just got everything coming through this back. It all comes through a hole back there. And that's kind of the guts of it. Not that much to it. One more thing I have in here is I've got my thermohygrometer, and reads the humidity too. See, the humidity is going up because it's just at that time in its cycle. It goes up, it goes down. Temperature's at 57, a little high. Refrigerator just turned on, but this one I actually just upgraded. This was only 10 bucks, and it's a Bluetooth. My phone tells me the average. It's pretty awesome, actually. Honestly, I used just these for a very long time, and my food still came out pretty damn amazing. But just always trying to dial it in better. So now if you have a basement that stays about 50 to 60 degrees and you can keep about 80% humidity, basements work great. Hell, caves work great. That's all I got today. If you found this video at all useful or entertaining, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my content, consider subscribing. It's painless, it's free, and put some love into your food. Peace.